Who would have ever anticipated that our sweet, precious, adorable children could make us feel so incredibly angry in those tough moments of parenting? In this lecture, I'll help you learn the tools to stay calm and in control when parenting feels difficult, and also how to teach your child how to stay calm and in control when they are angry. If you can learn how to self-regulate through conflict, you will help your child become a resilient human being with optimal mental health and a long-lasting positive parent-child relationship. Before we are parents, I think we anticipate the parenting journey with joy and optimism, thinking about all the cuteness and positive experiences of being a parent and having a child. But once you're in the thick of parenting, you'll quickly find that parenting is a very stressful and emotionally upsetting job at times. Our children's behavior from a young age can really push us to a point of desperation, where sometimes we're just so overwhelmed we lose control. In these tough moments, sometimes we just grasp for whatever might get things back under control, sometimes yelling, threatening punishment, using fear and intimidation. And these tactics just don't work well at changing our children's behavior. We need to start building this emotional intelligence within our families from a very young age, not only to help ourselves be able to stay calm and in control when we're upset as parents, but also actively teaching our children how to calm down when they are upset. I would recommend early in your parenting journey, by the time your child is verbal, maybe we call that the terrible twos, right? So around age 2, our children are talking. And we want to start early with them by putting feelings into words. Children go from acting out every emotion through behavior and meltdowns and crying and having fits to somehow becoming a young adult who's able to use communication and control their behavior when upset. Hopefully, that is certainly the goal. So along the way, what changes it from acting out to talking it out is the development of the frontal lobe. So it's so important in parenting to realize that your young children don't have a very developed frontal lobe yet, but we can facilitate their emotional maturity by helping them learn the tools they need to be able to communicate and self-regulate to calm down when they're upset. So early on with your kids, start teaching them feeling words. When you're reading a story together, talk about the feelings the characters seem to be having in the story. If you're watching a cartoon, talk about the feelings. Share your own feelings. Use a lot of I feel statements. Positive emotions, not only negative. Like you might say, I feel so happy when you give me a big hug. Or I feel so grateful when you give me a drawing that you made. And then start by putting your child's feelings into words as often as possible and encouraging them to use I feel statements. So there's a saying in neuroscience that we name it to tame it. If we can label an emotion and put it into words, we help calm down the stress reaction to some degree because we shift the part of the brain that's most active. So to be aware that we're having an emotion and identify a label for that feeling makes us use the frontal lobe and exercise our more intelligent brain. So we name it to tame it. So early on, put feelings into words as often as possible and try to give your children a rich understanding of the different types of feelings and what they're all called. So that vocabulary of emotion expression is a really helpful early tool. Next, I would think about teaching your children about their nervous system stress response. So I have some earlier videos about cognitive behavioral therapy, therapeutic parenting 101, and there's a lot of tools in there that you could bring home to work on with your children. But some basics would be talking to your kids about the interaction between their emotions, their thoughts, and their behavior. So that's our cognitive behavior therapy triangle. Emotions, thoughts, and behavior all affect each other. And we want to start by being aware of emotion and then helping our children recognize that there are thoughts driving that emotion. So for example, with anxiety, if our child feels nervous, worried, or scared about something, we want to help them realize their brain is having worried thoughts or scary images, and help them learn how to change those thoughts and images into coping thoughts, or seeing the finish line, or expecting positive outcome, self-encouragement, acceptance, whatever we need to do to help them realize this is anxiety, you're having worried thoughts, and there's a new way you can think about this that would feel better. We also want to early on start teaching our children about the behaviors that help us stay calm and in control. The number one most important self-regulation skill being diaphragm breathing. So I have a whole video all about different breathing techniques, but early on with your children, you just want to teach them to know their breathing. So this is just number one. Start to teach your child, oh, look, and when you're breathing, your belly's moving up and down. You can even have them lie down on the floor of their bed with a stuffed animal or a toy on their belly, and have them breathe in through their nose and lift their toy up in the air, maybe an inch, and then exhale and see how low they can sink that toy back down. And that's teaching them to engage their diaphragm, to move the breath. If you ever see your child mouth breathing, you might want to cue them and say, oh, you're breathing through your mouth right now. Try to close your mouth and breathe through your nose. We're learning more and more that mouth breathing is very detrimental to the nervous system balance point. And a lot of children that have anxiety and ADHD and sleep difficulties often have a mouth breathing habit. And if we can fix that through awareness, but also at nighttime doing mouth taping, I have information on that in other videos, but mouth taping at night to encourage the body to stay breathing through the nose, we can see pretty dramatic improvements in brain function and mental health. So we want to just cue our kids. We can be playful and blow with bubbles and say, look, it's your breath creating the bubbles. The air in that bubble used to be the air in your lungs. How neat. So we want to teach our children to be aware that they're breathing, to be aware that their belly can move with their breath, and encourage that nose to belly breathing habit. Now, to calm down, we want to help our children realize if they're getting angry, and they're tense in their body, and they're looking very upset on their face, often kids will hold their breath, or they'll breathe quickly, mouth to chest during a stress response. We want to help cue them and say, I can tell you're really angry, so we label the emotion, but it would help you calm down if you could take a deep belly breath in and a big full breath out. And often with kids, we just want to start with just practicing exhale. Just exhale long and slow, blow all the air out. Now breathe in from nose to belly, and just teach them to really focus on exhaling completely. Similarly, if our child is upset, and if we're upset, we want to breathe in a way that we're modeling intentional breath regulation to our child. Now, your child will not consciously probably realize that you're breathing in a certain way, but their nervous system is measuring or mirroring your nervous system to some degree. And if you can self-regulate your breathing, their body is more likely to be able to match that breath rhythm. So breathe audibly, where you maybe take that full breath in and a slow breath out. So you're kind of auditorily exhaling so they can hear that long, slow, intentional out-breath. So we want to regulate for our child. Now you can imagine if you're getting angry and you're hovering over your child and you're looking at them with maybe a hateful, like I say, like shooting lasers from your eyes, like, oh, if I could cause you harm right now, I would. Or you're using a really angry tone of voice, or you're looking intimidating in your body, hovering over them with some sense of threat. Your loss of calmness in your own nervous system is creating a sense of threat for your child's nervous system. So it doesn't mean that we have to be superhuman and never be upset, but we want to try to be aware of, am I causing this to get worse by adding fuel to their fire? If your child is already upset and you start escalating in your own desperation, it's not going to help your child calm down. Sometimes we can get so scary that our child will go from a fight or flight stress response into a freeze stress response. So we might feel like if I just yell loud enough, if I just get mad enough, they'll eventually stop. But usually that's not in a healthy way that will lead to behavior change. It usually means that your child's nervous system has become so frightened that they have shifted from fighting with you to freezing because they feel unsafe. So we just want to be aware that we have to have this long-term vision in our tough parenting moments. How do I handle this moment now to help my child learn the skills they need and develop at their most optimal emotional maturity rate possible? So it takes time. It's kind of like one day at a time. We have this long-term goal to help our child build their own coping skills, self-regulation tools, communication skills, but knowing that we may have to be patient as they're learning and growing. So in a tough moment, we're trying to not be a threat signal or a sense of threat and intimidation over our children, but rather a sense that I'm here, I'm firm, I'm strong, I am the adult, and I am in control and in charge here, but I also am safe, and I care about your feelings, and I have compassion when you're upset. So if our child is upset, we might encourage them to put their feelings into words, but we can also just verbally show understanding. I can tell you're really, really disappointed that you can't watch a show right now. I know that's so frustrating when you love your cartoons and we just can't watch any more screen time today. I know you're upset with me for having to set that limit. So just to validate them and say, I see you. I understand the emotion, and the emotion makes sense. It's okay that you're upset right now, but I have to be the grown-up and set these healthy boundaries for you. Now, we can also work on distraction. So sometimes it's helpful to put on music and kind of shift the energy, especially if we're in the car and we have a child upset. Music can be helpful. If they have a song they love to sing, that can be helpful because if they want to sing along, that's going to help calm them down. There's a calming impact on that singing and creating vibration through the vocal cords. It affects the vagus nerve, just like oming or humming or sighing on exhale. So music can be really helpful. Movement can be really helpful. So often our children are they've been kind of sitting around too much, and we could go out for a walk or get outside or put on music to have a little dance party. And that movement can kind of help our children reset when they've been in a stress response. So we want to help teach our child about their emotions, about their fight, flight, freeze, stress response, to notice their thoughts, to be aware of their body, and we want to teach them how to communicate assertively. I teach a very basic communication skill of I feel and I need. So we've already talked about labeling emotion, and then adding to that, I'm feeling frustrated, I wish I could watch another show, or I'm feeling sad, I need a hug. Or I'm feeling so angry, I need to go cool down. So I feel I need is really helpful communication to help our children how to verbally express how they're feeling. And that doesn't mean we'll always give in to the need. So they might say, I'm so mad, I need another TV show. And you might say, I know you're really mad. I know you're super frustrated that we have limits on screen time. Tomorrow you can watch another show. So what else can we do right now to have fun? Let's think about what we can do. And let's look forward to the next time that screen time is available. So we're not necessarily going to give in, but we want to teach our children to express their feelings and needs in words so that they feel seen and understood. And even that we can validate their emotion, but redirect their behavior. So if we can teach this communication, it's really helpful. If you have more than one child, I highly recommend that you start teaching this I feel, I need, back and forth conflict resolution as early as your children are verbal. So if you have a 3 and 5-year-old and they're fighting over sharing a toy, we want to stop the conflict, get low and be in the middle, just like a mediator. And you would say, okay, one at a time, tell me how you're feeling, or tell your sibling, how do you feel? Okay, so you're feeling mad because you haven't gotten a turn with the toy. Okay. So you're going to wait, and now we're going to ask your sibling, How are you feeling and why? Well, I feel mad because I feel like he gets the toy more often than I do. Okay. So what do you need? I need a turn. Okay. And I hear that you're having a turn right now. How much more time do you need before you'll be ready to share and have your sibling get a turn? So we can have this back and forth. I feel. Well, I need or want. And then a compromise solution as best we can figure out. It might mean using a timer to make sure that sharing time is equally divided so they know that 5 minutes is 5 minutes and now it's your brother's turn, and that equally he'll get 5 minutes. It might mean that we find a way for them to take turns making a decision if they can't agree on a show or a game or an activity they want to do together. So how about your brother makes a decision this time, and then next time you'll get to make the decision. So we try to make sure that each child feels they have a voice, that they feel that they have feelings that matter, that they're being considered in the decisions being made, and that things will be fair. And if we can just see that things will be fair and equal as much as possible, we tend to feel calmed down from that, knowing that I won't be treated unjustly or unfairly. So these are some techniques to start working on when you are frustrated as a parent, to say, I'm feeling frustrated. I've asked you several times to pick up your toys, and I see that you still haven't started. So what's your plan? I'd like to know when you plan to clean up. So this might surprise a lot of parents, but I often encourage you to ask your children, what's your plan to get this chore done? When can I count on you doing this? What time works for you? Or with teenagers, asking them to commit to a contract of when they intend to take care of their responsibilities. When we have buy-in, we've been given a voice and we get some say in when or how those kind of have-tos, those unpleasant chores or activities get done. If we've been asked and kind of given this respect to say, when can I count on you doing this? And then our parent backs off, we're more likely to follow through and comply. So sometimes in parenting, we're feeling this urgency, like this must be done right now. And sometimes that's true, that we really do have time pressure. But a lot of the time we can ask our children, this needs to get done today or soon. What are you doing right now? Are you in a good point where you can put that away and go do the thing I'm asking you to do? Or do you need some more time to finish your activity? Okay, how much time do you need? All right, 15 minutes? Great, let's put 15 minutes on a timer so you can finish what you're doing. And then when the timer beeps, I can count on you to go do that thing I've asked you. So sometimes a way to deal with conflict in parent-child relationship is to prevent conflict, to be more strategic about how we give instructions, how we get our children to have more buy-in, and to have more conversation with them to get their input so they don't feel resentful as if they're being bossed around all the time. So preventing conflict is really important. But let's say, good communication and good prevention, things just really blow up because sometimes they might just really go haywire. What can we do at that point? So we're trying to put their feelings into words to show that we understand. We're trying to model self-regulation and be their frontal lobe for them. We're trying to stay in control of our breathing, our facial expression, our tone of voice, and we're maybe going to need to disengage. So taking a cool down time is a good idea. It can be really helpful to say, we're both upset. Let's take a little break to cool down, and then we'll come back to talk about this when we're both calm and in control. Now, this doesn't mean sending your child to their room. It doesn't mean doing a time out, but it means choosing to physically separate a little bit. And it might mean just going to two opposite sides of the room for a couple minutes, but stopping talking and taking a little bit of a physical break, a little bit of a time out for ourselves to just let the emotions settle. Very often it only takes 1 or 2 minutes for the anger to calm down several notches. So a little bit of a break can be helpful. It might mean that you have to tell your child, I can see that you're really angry right now. You need to go cool down. First we calm, then we communicate. So often our kids get mad and they're just trying to yell or cry or kind of splutter out their complaints. And we have to say, whoa, you're really upset right now. Step away to cool down. Once you're calm, then we can communicate. First we calm down, then we can talk about this together. So we really want to sort of require that we don't go head to head in conflict. We don't, lash out and scream back and forth. First, we have to take care of our emotions, calm down enough so that we can use our smart brain and be able to communicate effectively. So teach that little motto in your family. Whoa, everyone's too upset right now. First we calm down, then we'll come back and communicate. So that's a great habit to teach the whole family. So once we separate if needed, we come back together. And then we kind of pace that conversation. How are you feeling and why? What do you need? Okay, well, this is how I'm feeling and why. And these are my needs or my responsibilities. Do you have any ideas what we can do here? I have a suggestion. And just try to do that problem-solving communication together to find a little bit of a way of compromising if possible. So sometimes our kids are so out of control, though, they won't disengage. I love attachment parenting, and I read attachment parenting books. But really in attachment parenting, they have totally shamed the idea of a timeout. And I will tell you, some kids don't ever in their whole lives need a timeout. They aren't kids who go into this extreme red zone of totally losing control of not just their emotions, but their bodies. I have parented and worked with many kids who do reach a point of stress reactivity that's just out of control. Now, in these situations, attachment parenting is not going to rein in or calm the fire down. If you can sit with your child when they're upset and they're not being violent, great. Do a time in. Say, we're not going to talk, we're just going to sit here together and calm down together. If your child is in control enough to do that, wonderful. But sometimes children are not. Sometimes they're thrashing, they're spitting, if they have an object within reach, they'll throw it at you, they can get destructive. And I do feel that at a certain level, that teaching your child a strategic, structured, predictable timeout procedure can be really therapeutic in parenting. Now, I think timeouts are done incorrectly and don't work most of the time, so I'll give you just some quick pointers. So first thing is, we introduce timeout outside of a moment of conflict. So when all is well, you're going to gather your kids together and have a little family meeting and talk about how you're going to start using timeout as a family practice. Get out markers and paper, and you're going to write down the steps. So I recommend truly just having a 3-minute timeout because I think that is long enough for most kids. So you would say, first step, you'll always get one warning. So one warning would be, hey, you're starting to lose control. Why don't you step away to calm down? If you won't, we'll have to do a timeout. So we always want to start with a warning. And so timeout rules, number 1 is you'll always get one warning. Step number 2 is timeout is 3 minutes on a timer. If you use timeout with your child, I recommend you have a kitchen timer and you keep it right near your timeout spot. A timeout spot shouldn't be their bedroom. It should be one dedicated chair in the living room in the family space, or maybe a lower stair if you have an upstairs, so it's still within a common area. But we want a dedicated location, this chair or this spot. It could be a certain rug on the floor or a corner with a couple pillows in it. And we want to know the child to know if you get a warning and you're not able to control your behavior, and I say you have a timeout, this is what we're going to do. I'll say, we need a timeout to calm down. We'll put just 3 minutes on your timer and you'll come sit here to have a cool down break. So this is the difference in traditional timeout. We used to think of timeout as punishment. You need to sit here to suffer 1 minute per year of age. So we're talking 10 minutes for a 10-year-old child who's way too old to be using a timeout. Timeout is really only for very young kids. I would say ages 2 or 3 up to 5 or 6. There's a window in early childhood where timeouts can be a therapeutic parenting strategy that does help your child learn to self-regulate and regain control when they're spiraling out of control. Traditionally, timeout was thought of more as punishment, like you deserve to sit here and be bored and ignored and upset, and maybe you'll learn your lesson. That's not what I'm talking about. I never recommend punishment. I don't recommend punishment because the research would tell us punishment doesn't change human behavior. I recommend lots of reinforcement, but mostly relationship reinforcement. High fives, loving eye contact with a smile, pat on the back, a big hug, verbally expressing how grateful you are, how proud you are of them, all the progress you see them making. Maybe we have a spontaneous treat or celebration to just acknowledge a big accomplishment. But I don't recommend punishment because punishment doesn't change behavior. But a timeout can be a short window of just what we call a cool down time that requires the child to step away from the heat of the moment, and in just 2 or 3 minutes of sitting down, quiet, we don't talk to each other during timeout, they can start to have their nervous system calm down. So in our family meeting, we're going to say, you get a warning, timeout is 3 minutes on a timer. We'll use this chair or location for timeout. I will stay present. So here's another thing is we don't send our child away to their room and to feel like they've been abandoned or rejected. We stay physically within eyesight of them. Don't stare them down. You want to probably sit with kind of this peripheral vision. And what you're showing is, even though you're upset and I'm upset, I'm not leaving, I'm here, I'm available, but you need to calm down and I need to calm down. And so if you stay within this, peripheral vision where they can see you, it will help your child feel safe and be able to start to calm down faster. So you say, I will stay present. And when the timer beeps, we will talk about the problem. But you cannot get up out of your chair or your timeout spot, and you cannot scream out during your 3 minutes or we'll start the timer over. So this is a pretty important step. If you have a child and you direct them to the timeout chair and they get up and they run away, we're not going to keep the timer going. We're going to stop the timer, stand there quietly. You can't physically force them to sit in that chair, but you can prevent other activities from moving forward. So if they go to just start, dumping out a Lego bin and start playing, you're going to say, no Legos until we deal with the problem that we're having right now. Maybe they walk away and just grab a stuffed animal. I recommend flexibility. And I can, maybe even ask a child, are you getting control of your feelings? Or are you calming down right now? Or do you need to go to timeout? So there's a different scenario, right? Some kiddo might just want their stuffed animal to hug, and you can just kind of sit with them and give them that little bit of freedom and flexibility. But another child might be being destructive and just trying to be defiant and, not comply with the timeout expectation. So it would depend on kind of the tone of why they're getting up out of their chair. But ideally, we tell them, you only have to sit for 3 minutes, but you have to stay there until the timer beeps. And no calling out. And we can restart the timer if needed. And we just tell them, when you sit, we'll start the timer. Or once you're quiet, we'll start the timer. And we'll just try to keep enforcing that these first few times we use a timeout. Once a child learns what the timeout procedure is, they tend to comply pretty well with it, as long as it's very consistent every time. And it needs to be brief, and it needs to be non-punishing. It just needs to be what we call a cool down break for everybody. So I really recommend that you write down the steps, and the only real rule is you can't run away from the chair and you can't scream out. We'll start the timer over. And then it would be after your timer beeps, if you're calm, we'll have a cuddle and talk it through. That's when we're going to do the time in. Now we can go sit and transition to a couch. We can hold them, hopefully. We can hug them. Because they had that little bit of a break to just have to be quiet and stop the fight mode they were stuck in. And now we can maybe work through the problem without them losing control. So I do think there is a place to use timeout when we're in conflict with our children, if they're really just pushing to a limit of losing control. But I would say very rarely, and most children don't need that. Really only when children have totally lost control, what we might call flipping their lid. So flipping the lid is this saying that really means that you've lost all function of your frontal lobe, you have no self-control, and you're in full impulsive limbic system part of the brain in this intense fight-flight stress response. So I don't recommend timeout typically, but I do think if your child is very reactive with anger, and you tend to get very reactive in response to their emotional stress, timeout can be a structured, predictable technique to help support both of you self-regulating. And again, it should be brief. It should be a consistent practice that's very predictable for your child. Stay present to help the attachment feel secure. And then as soon as the timer beeps, you try to re-engage. So there is a time and a place, I think, to separate and take space. And with young kids, if they really lose control and become aggressive, possibly a timeout, but a brief timeout. And with that time in afterwards to reestablish you as a soothing presence, that you are there for them to help them calm down. So we work through these different steps depending on how intense your child's anger is. And then we want to always have repair conversations, which is kind of called a reunion, coming back together after a rupture in the relationship and trying to repair any harm that was caused. This is a time where we can kind of go through more I feel while I feel, I need while I need. So maybe it's at this point we can try to understand each other better. And it's also where we can both apologize. So I really recommend in parenting that you be willing to model an effective apology. It doesn't mean that you're saying it was your fault, but you're owning your piece of the conflict or the thing that you did that maybe wasn't as strategic as it could have been to prevent your child becoming upset. So if you're going to have a rupture, let's make it lead to some positive growth and change. So let's break down where things went wrong, where you didn't handle things well or your child lost control. And the challenge is for each of you to say, next time something like this comes up, what will you do differently and what will I do differently? And you both commit to being more intentional next time a rupture like that occurs. So if possible, you always want to have this repair and reunion interaction with some constructive, where did things get off track here and kind of unravel? How can we both do better next time? And then if you can, loving gaze, smile at each other, have a nice hug. You really want to re-secure the attachment after a conflict has erupted. So as best as you can show your child, I love you, I forgive you, we're all good, there's no hard feelings, I'm not going to be wounded from this, I love you just the same as I did before we had our tough moment. So that is so important in parenting, that we repair actively, own our peace, apologize for where we went off track, and then make sure our child feels fully reattached and secure with us once everybody's calmed down and we've talked through it. If you would like to read more books on parent self-regulation and helping your children self-regulate, my favorite authors on this topic are Dr. Dan Siegel and Dr. Payne Bryson. And they've written several books together. And their newest one is called The Power of Showing Up. And they also have a book called No Drama Discipline. I think they have a book, or Dan Siegel has a book called Brainstorm, which is more about teenagers' emotional patterns and brain development and ways to be more intentional and strategic how you parent your teenagers. And so I really love Dan Siegel's work. I think he's an excellent resource for therapeutic parenting guidance and really about understanding your child's developing nervous system. Any books I mention, I'll always write them in the show notes just below the video so that you can reference those in more detail. One thing that Dan Siegel and Payne Bryson teach is about chasing the why. So as a parent, being curious, why is my child reacting like this? What is really at the root cause of their emotion? If you listen to my longer lecture on mastering anger, you'll learn that anger is often a surface level emotion, but beneath anger might be anxiety. It might be low self-esteem. It might be a fear of failure, a fear of not being good enough. And what we might be seeing is angry behavior, but it might be coming from a more vulnerable place of anxiety or insecurity. So as a parent, if you can, instead of just shutting down the behavior, like knock that off or stop doing that or that's naughty, you're trying to shut it down, try to understand it. Why might my child be behaving this way? What might be their perception of things? Are they worried about something? I have seen so many clients, children, who come to me for anger and defiance. Their parent is coming in saying they have such a temper, they can't control their anger, they act out all the time. And more often than not, I will discover that that child is highly anxious. They have a lot of worry, a lot of insecurity, a lot of scary thoughts and images in their brain, but they're not verbally expressing that. And so they'll just shut down and dig their heels in and refuse to cooperate and get really, really angry. But they're in this desperation to protect themselves from something that feels unsafe. So chase the why. Do try to figure out what might be causing my child to react with such big emotion. And how do I create more structure and predictability for them so they know what to expect day to day? It's really great if chores or homework time is really structured and consistent. It just creates less pushback. And it's really helpful too if we define goals sometimes for our kids. So again, reward, not punish. So if your child is having a lot of angry reactivity, start a reward program. Write down, again, each line a different color marker. These are some goals I want you to work on. What are some rewards you want to earn? Let's create a piggy bank where your tokens can be earned to get the rewards off the list of things you want to do. And every day track their goals. So it might be that goal number 1 is to put their feelings into words, just to practice I feel statements every day. That can earn them a token. Another goal might be practicing their nose to belly deep breathing at bedtime. And that just needs to be maybe 5 full, slow breaths. Great, you did your breathing practice, you earn a token. It might be trying to stay in control of their body when they're angry. So that doesn't mean we're saying don't get angry, but we're trying to encourage them to control their body. So no hitting, no destructive behavior, no, thrashing on the floor or whatever their behavior might be. Saying when you're angry, trying to control your body from reacting in those ways that we need to work on. So teach your children about their fight, flight, freeze, stress response. Teach them to be aware of their body and breath. Teach them to notice their thoughts, their automatic negative thoughts. We can shorten that to ants. That's Dr. Daniel Amen's term of automatic negative thoughts. He teaches how to squash the ants, right? To say, that negative thought doesn't help me. That leads to emotion that feels bad. And if I can notice those ants, I can choose a new way of thinking. So we work on that cognitive restructuring. We work on putting feelings into words and using that nonviolent communication of I feel, I need, and I need. So I feel, I need communication is a wonderful life skill. And that will carry them through all their relationships. They'll do better with their friends, their teachers, their eventual partner, and their eventual own parenting. So teaching that communication is so helpful in their life journey. You need to be the frontal lobe because in a conflict with a child, you're the only adult there with a fully intact, fully developed frontal lobe. And so it's really important that you are the one to try to stay aware, try to regulate your breath, try to control your tone of voice, try to control your facial expression in your body, like those nonverbal cues, trying to stay non-threatening, yet be this loving alpha, which means you are the grown-up in charge, you are the alpha, but you are also loving and safe. So I hope this gives you some good tools to start working with. If you have a child who's highly reactive or very violent when they're angry, there could be biochemistry going on. I'm always going to recommend that you consider seeing a functional medicine trained physician and run some labs to look at your child's underlying biochemistry. Some of the things we always want to think about are omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, magnesium. These are really important things to have in our child's nutrition. Balancing of zinc and copper can be looked at and can be a factor in mental health. Iron levels can be a factor. And of course, if your child's had any brain injury, we want to consider that and do brain healing therapies and possibly neurofeedback. So don't rule out that this is just naughty behavior or totally volitional on your child's part. There could be underlying biochemistry or neurology that's making it difficult for your child to manage their stress reactions and anger. So we want to have compassion. We want to realize that our child is just young. They're trying their best with the underdeveloped brain they have, with what they've learned so far in life, and with their own big, scary, sometimes overwhelming and painful human emotions. So pause, breathe so that you can think. So that I go into detail in that in my Mastering Anger lecture. So we pause, we breathe so that we can think. So we want to teach that to our children, this PBT little practice. Well, let's pause. Let's breathe on purpose. How are you thinking? Let's figure out how to talk about this issue. So we're teaching this self-awareness, and we're trying to be patient, helping our children get through these developmental phases where big emotions can come up. But the more you can self-regulate, the more they will be able to self-regulate. The more you control your breathing, they will control their breathing. If you can control your body, they will control their body. And when we have to, we are the alpha. If we need to disengage, that's helpful. If we can redirect through music or exercise or distraction or a different activity, great. If things get totally out of control, we might need a cool down time. For younger kids, an actual structured, predictable timeout routine. But we always, always, always want to come back and repair and reunite and re-establish secure attachment with our kids. I hope this gives you some useful information to work with. Just keep the faith, keep trying, every day have your intention clear, and little by little you'll see your children able to communicate through emotion rather than behaviorally act it out, and you'll see that you're more able to stay aware through difficult moments and feel good about how you resolve conflicts and those little stressful things that come up in every relationship. The long-term goal is wanting to have a secure, loving, mutually enjoyable parent-child relationship across time. It's very much within reach if we just have these few tools and this clear intention to help guide us. Thank you for joining me at Root Cause of Happiness. If this information was useful to you, please share it with others seeking knowledge and tools for resilience. It is a meaningful contribution to the world when we become proactive in our healing journeys, by learning and growing, by increasing our awareness, by addressing the root cause of happiness.